Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Callum Senjov. I'm the National President of Imagine, as well as a member of the Institute's Climate Action and Sustainability Committee. And I'd like to welcome you to this March edition of Sustainability Snacks. First, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the many countries from which we're meeting from today. And I'd like to pay respect to their elders past, present, and emerging across all the lands across Australia and acknowledge their continuing relationship to lands, water, and culture. I have been fortunate enough to be out of town and miss the torrential downpours and unseasonal cyclone experienced in Meanjin and Brisbane and the neighbouring areas. But I think this time has reminded us that this climate emergency is affecting our planet at a rapidly escalating pace. And for us to have a future on this land, we all need to contribute to its care. And we hope that Sustainability Snacks will contribute to that. This is a series of short online sessions that aim to demystify sustainability in practice. In just 30 minutes, we'll hear from a practitioner on how they are reducing their impact. This is a joint initiative of Imagine and SONA as part of the Institute, and we hope that this knowledge sharing will help to accelerate necessary climate action. Today, we have Sarah Lebner from Cooee Architecture joining us to share a few ideas for designing smaller while maximising client satisfaction. Hopefully, it has become more widespread as a concept, but hopefully we're all on the call know that building less is one of the higher value methods of designing in a more sustainable manner, pretty much only second to building nothing at all. Sarah Lebner is a Director of Cooee Architecture, a regional practice focusing on energy efficient and low carbon homes. Cooee practices throughout the Victorian High Country, New South Wales Snowy Mountains, ACT and surrounds. Prior to relocating, Sarah was the Principal Architect at Lighthouse Architecture and Science in Canberra. Sarah is also the author of 101 Things I Didn't Learn in Architecture School, recipient of the 2023 Dulux Study Tour Prize and the Australian Institute of Architects 2020 National Emerging Architect Prize winner. I'd like to welcome Sarah. A bit of Q&A, a bit of housekeeping rather. Please make sure you're muted. There'll be a Q&A after the talk. Please drop your questions in the chat and I'll be able to moderate that for the last about 10 minutes or so. So over to Sarah, thank you.
Thanks for having me, Callum and Co. It is very nice to be here. I'll get my screen sharing. Yes, my young practice is called Cooee Architecture, and we're called Cooee because Cooee is a uniquely regional Australian word. It originates from Aboriginal languages, was adopted by European settlers, and is used widely today to call out to someone in a remote setting. And I like to think that we are calling out to regional Australians to work towards low carbon, regional, resilient homes and great lives within them. And for some map context of where we are, this little house is where we're located near Corryong and the upper Murray, banks of the Murray River, near the Snowy Mountains on Ngarigo country. And this yellow zone is sort of our ideal service zone. Wagga to the north, Albury-Wodonga to the west, Snowy Mountains to the south, and we keep a couple of Canberra jobs because Jaden over here is a graduate architect on our team and based there. So I'm giving a very quick presentation on the elephant in the room, which is size today. I wrote this article recently for Lunchbox Architect on 15 reasons why smaller homes are better. So to start off with our context, in the 1950s, the average house size in Australia was typically around 100 square metres. In the 1980s, that had grown to 150 to 160 square metres. And we peaked in the 2010s at about 241 square metres. We've declined ever so slightly since to 230 square metres. And how does that compare globally? This is a graph of the 20 biggest economies in the world and our average new house size. And Australia is right up the top here. I think this is really important because we tend to, or sometimes we equate our house size with our quality of life or happiness. But I think we all know that there's plenty of countries lower in this list that have a great quality of life. And why is this a problem? Just in case anyone didn't know, I think you already know, buildings contribute to 39% of global carbon emissions with significant embodied carbon release during construction. And in Australia, it's even, our embodied impact is even more because new homes generate roughly double the carbon compared to those in some European countries, partly due to the big distances that our materials have to travel. Now, we tend to tell ourselves that energy efficiency standards are solving this problem, but if you zoom out, the reality is that the increase in our energy efficiency standards is really has only been matched by increase in size. So yes, the operational energy might be coming down, but then we are getting bigger. So we're using more energy because our homes are bigger and our embodied footprint keeps going up. The good news, though, is that we are getting very good at that operational energy efficiency. Net zero, so net zero operational use is quite achievable through strategies like passive solar design, draft proofing, insulation, electrification, efficient heating. And these days, with just a modest solar system, it's quite easily achievable to achieve net zero energy consumption on a home. So I was asked to share a couple of examples from our practice on what that really looks like when we are focusing on and pushing smaller home solutions. This project, the 150-year-old cottage, is a lovely story because this family bought a block in a new subdivision, built the dream house, the new 4-bedroom, 2 living room. One of them was a media room home. But they said it just wasn't a nice lifestyle. They stepped outside and they just heard the neighbours' air conditioning. They sold it. They bought this 150-year-old cottage on a big leafy block in Bungendore. And honestly, it was in average shape. It needed complete re-stumping. It had termites in the walls. So they came to us. It's just 2 bedrooms and wondered what they could do. So we took off the little mouldy lean-to that was a walk-in robe down here. We opened up this entry room to create more space in the kitchen and dining here. We opened up here between the living and kitchen a little bit as well for greater sense of space and light. And then the main thing we did was north is to the back down here. So in the old house, only a couple of windows facing north and big verandas over them. So as we were extending for an ensuite, study and bed, bringing in a bit more of that nice northeastern aspect and making sure we could get it in here as well. Here's some before and afters of the kitchen and that tiny cramped dining area that was also the work from home area now opened up. And importantly, we took this home from 0 stars to 6.7 stars, and this is a fairly challenging cool climate. So that's an 85% decrease in heating and cooling. And I want to highlight here, that is per square metre. So you may not all realise that energy efficiency ratings are per square metre, and certainly most of the public don't understand this. If you have a 100 square metre 8-star home, it will use half the energy to heat and cool than a 200 square metre 8-star home. So even our energy efficiency star ratings are kind of withholding this truth-telling story about size and motivating the industry in that way. Another little project we did in Canberra, it was a brick veneer, north is up the page here, 3 bedrooms, an outside laundry, 1 bathroom, and then these very compartmentalised kitchen, dining, living spaces. Interestingly, these clients had worked with another architect already and said that they were sort of really pushed into the idea of extending being the only way they could achieve their brief. And they were really thrilled when we came up with 4 options, many more than we would normally do, but 4 options that only added a few square metres by enclosing this sort of laundry area. And one of the options has a pop-out under the eave, so no extension of roof area. 4 options that met their brief to varying degrees with different pros and cons, and they've now got a full indoor laundry, 2 bathrooms, some sort of mudroom, pantry, nice big functional kitchen, big open plan living, dining, getting a lot more light in. So they're pretty thrilled about that. So 5 tips on how you can convince clients to find their lease house necessary. Because I find the next thought here is that people say, well, how am I going to convince people? People come to me with their brief and that's what I have to deal with. So here's 5 tips. The first one is list it as a practice benchmark. So Cooee has these 18 benchmarks that we aim for on every project. We may not necessarily get there, but we have a discussion about whether we're going to or why we may not. And one of ours is space efficient and flexible living, less than 180 meters square for an average family home. That's not revolutionary, but it brings a line in the sand to clients. Number two, and this is for anyone in a more existing practice, is to show examples, hold open homes, build confidence in great small spaces. Most members of the public haven't experienced great small spaces, and they think they need more space to solve a lot of the issues they have with their current home, when the issue is probably just poor planning, poor function, poor sense of light. So if you can show people examples, it will build confidence in what you're then proposing to them on paper. So nearly all Lighthouse clients when I work there, and nearly all Cooee clients will have been inside a finished project early on in their design process. Number three, this is a great one if you are just starting out in your career. Study space sizes yourself. Keep a small tape measure and notebook with you so that you can sketch small spaces that work well, hotels, cafes. Build your own confidence in what you know can be achieved. Number four, present early opinions of probable costs with a clear connection to size. So this is from a new project. Our clients get this budget rating, stole this idea from Maytree Studios. And here these clients had a budget of $550. We gave them 2 projects that were similar to their home and were recently costed, sort of a brief description on why they were higher or lower rates. And this was we gave them 2 concepts. One was their sort of wish list home. We demonstrated that was going to challenge their budget. And then we gave them the smaller option that we could show gave them a much higher chance of coming in within their budget. And the final one, talk about it, write about it, be a champion for it. People will come to you requesting it. I know people often fear, and this doesn't just go for size, this goes for any type of work you want to do. They fear pigeonholing themselves into a certain niche or message, but the more you can speak about the work you want to be doing and who you are, the more likely you are to connect to members of the public who are looking for exactly that, and you'll be a really good match. And finally, I really want young practitioners to understand this. I speak to a lot of students and graduates who are considering leaving the industry because they feel like their work's not aligning to their values at the moment. Do not be fooled into thinking that architects aren't relevant during a cost of living crisis. If we take this Venn diagram, environmental sustainability, quality of life, and affordability, yes, a lot of architects might mainly be operating here. And this mix between affordable and quality of life, we sort of tend to associate perhaps with project homes or mass builds. They sort of sell this idea that you can have all the rooms and the fancy tiles and it'll be affordable. And I don't think anyone ends up over here on purpose. I think you end up there by accident. But I really believe the only way we can hit the full trifecta here is through good design and well-designed smaller homes. We are uniquely skilled to offer solutions to that trifecta, so make that your mission. Finally, 3 resources I'd love to share with you. The first one is that article that I wrote for Lunchbox Architect. The second one, I used the term earlier, least house necessary. That's a term coined by Shanine Fanton, and her TED talk about that is fantastic. And thirdly, there's a podcast episode on Undercover Architect interviewing Jane Hilliard from Designful on Enoughness. I think I saw Jane attending, so hi Jane. And you can find more resources from us and follow us here. And that is it.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Sarah. Absolutely short and sweet with so much little goodies in there. So thanks for that. And we're actually going to stay on time for once, which is amazing. If anyone does have some questions for Sarah, please just drop them in the chat for now. And so we can read them out and start that conversation with Sarah in a moment. So please throw those in the chat. I'll chuck in a question first is, do you find, I guess, when we looked at the 5 tips, and obviously in the cost of living crisis, cost might be a big one, is showing is cost one of the bigger ones that you're finding has an impact on clients nowadays of those 5, conversations you might have?
Yeah, probably. I think it's one of our biggest tools, particularly in gauging some kind of scale on those changes. So I think anyone here who's working in residential design knows about project creep. And I know the example that I specifically had in there was a project where we really struggled with project creep. You know, they just wanted to add this, just wanted to extend that room a little bit, just wanted to add an extra cupboard here. And we go back to that table at every stage of the design and plug in, you know, yes, we've only increased 6 square meters, but you need to look at and acknowledge that that's still a big chunk of money. So definitely. But I think it's spelling it out that's really clear. Clients can hear only a certain extent when we're saying it verbally. If you're printing it down and giving it to them on a piece of paper, that's a whole other thing in accepting and processing that information. I think we've all known clients who can get stuck in a bit of an optimism loop and sort of change the narrative along their way and then get a really big shock when the quote comes in. So putting things down on paper and comparing to past projects gives us a very tangible tool without going into that realm of us being estimators, because, you know, we're not estimators. We can't predict what their project's going to be, but we can give them a metric compared on similar recent projects.
I do like that quote of optimism loop as a term.
Yeah.
It does come across in most projects of everyone's all happy until the first quote comes back and think of the world of the project. Do you find, I guess now you've had, it certainly takes a bit of experience and confidence to be able to say to a client that what you're doing, you know, to keep withdrawing their scope back to their briefing document or back to what almost, I guess, do you ever tell them what they need by saying, oh, you've come with 4 beds, 2 media rooms, but what you need is actually, you know, something slightly smaller or slightly different? How do you have that conversation?
Yeah, and that's a really good question, Callum, because I don't want to present the idea that I'm a dictator. I always tell clients that, you know, every conversation is, but it's your home, you do what you want. And I would never use wording so strong as you must do this or you need to do this. It's all just empowering them. So if they've got that information, I'm really happy if they go either way, as long as they acknowledge that, and I hear them saying, yes, we still want to increase the size of that, and we acknowledge that that's going to take that number up. Or, you know, they might say, wow, that really puts it in perspective for us, and thank you so much for helping us understand that so we can control our budget by keeping that down. So it is never about being a dictator in any element of design. It is always empowering them to make really informed decisions.
Cool. Just to remind everyone, if you have any questions for Sarah, throw them into the chat. Otherwise, you've got to hear a few more times from me. So yeah, please throw some words in there.
You can ask questions about other things if you want to.
Yeah. Sarah's had a lot of very good career and a lot of nice work coming out, so very knowledgeable. So please throw anything in there. Looking regionally, and not to say particularly coming from your career in Canberra, not saying that's the most dense urban center in the world, but do you find a difference between client and expectations on size and what they want between, let's say, urban and regionally?
Yeah, it's a nice question. I wrote an article for Sanctuary exactly on this topic. And I think I started by saying that the city-country divide is a cultural chasm that we love to hate in Australia. The cynicism I had from city friends about what country clients would be like, and then some cynicism I had from country clients about what my former city clients must have been like, is just amusing, really. We're not as different as we like to think. However, there are some very key differences about rural living. I think I went through 8 or so in the article. size does come into play. I mean, I'd first say it is a complete myth that there aren't rural people that are highly environmentally motivated. Rural people, particularly those on farms, are living and very awake to climate change because it is already here for us and affecting us and our day-to-day life very heavily. So you can throw that one out, and often as long as they're sustainably motivated, there's a similarity between rural and urban clients on their willingness to be space efficient. But there are obviously trickier things, like we usually have to fit in a chest freezer. And now I'm talking about people on farm, so not just in town, but on farm. You might need to fit in a chest freezer because you've got a lot of home produce, or similar. Maybe you do need a bit more pantry because you're just doing so much produce from your garden, or you're doing less frequent trips to town. We often talk about hosting family because often it's really hard to just send family to a nearby hotel, but there's lots of great flexible ways to do that. We don't just have to build more rooms. But the absolute biggest one for me that often affects not just size, but durability and sort of budget and quality investment is the legacy question and the investment question for farmers. Farmhouses have zero value. You can't even get a home loan to build a house on a farm. A lot of people don't realize that. And if you're selling your farm, the value of that farm is so high that, the cost of the house doesn't even really factor in it. So farmers are my favorite clients because they're not obsessed with resale value. They are building because they want something that's going to be there for multiple generations and handed down and really stand the test of time. And that is a amazing brief to have. And if you can still tie in a bit of sort of flexibility of use and size into that, then I think you're winning.
That probably leads us on to the first question that's popped up in the chat from Jane, who says, conversely, how do you navigate the topic of just in case of resale value? Some people seem to be nervous about building small because of resale reasons.
Yeah, I usually tell people that I think the resale of what we think the market wants is basically a myth these days. I think the market is absolutely thirsty for smaller options and for more energy efficient options. I know at Lighthouse over a decade, we had a handful of previous Lighthouse projects go to the market, and they all achieved significantly over, the expected price for what they were and where they were. And, there's all this conversation about diversity of housing issues. I usually say to clients, you're creating something that will be in an absolute niche that the right person will really, really want, which they usually agree with. I think the people that are coming to me are already so sold on this idea. I suspect it's a very easy discussion for me to have compared to people who might not be interfacing with people that have already arrived at that mindset.
This probably also then ties into one of the questions from Karen, talking about how can the AIA and I guess architects generally assist with educating the public to become more accessible to broader population demographics and increase the value of architecture for everyone. So I guess do people come, like how can we get people coming to architects rather than the project homes?
Yeah, just talk about it. Talk. If you've been on my social media, you'll see that I am always focusing messaging to the broader public. So that's probably one. A lot of architects, when they present themselves online, are speaking to other architects and seeking approval of other architects. I think we're trained into that after 5 years at university, where we literally defend ourselves to other architects. But, you look at any other industry, and if we want to educate people, we can very easily just be that voice and share the knowledge. And it is amazing the messages I get coming in directly from people so many people that I've never worked with, but they'll tell me proudly about their house and how much I helped them with it and how much the information got them on the right direction. And not only is that what we need to be doing, but it's very, very rewarding. And some people might say, but you're giving away all this information for free. That's just absolute rubbish, because people also follow along and then decide they want to work with Cooee, and they arrive very well prepped, very, very keen to work with me because they've had all those touch points. They feel like they know me and know the work that we do. So they're already sold before they even sort of knock on the door. So it's only ever a win-win. If you're not one to get in front of a camera, you can write articles, you can sort of volunteer in different high school programs. There's so many ways to do it, and I think it is never lost time. It always comes back around to grow your business and boost your business.
Speaking of sharing knowledge, do you have any other examples of other architects that you particularly follow? You know, you're talking about Shanine just before. Who are you? Who should everyone else
Who are my
here go and check
architect
out?
crushes?
Who are your architect crushes?
Architect, and I'd broaden that to say just generally design, building crushes. I love Maytree Studios, and they share a lot of great information and are shaking up service. I'm really interested by Architect GP, Sarah Hobday North, and what she's doing, offering alternative services. I'm a fairly avid follower of Amelia Lee on Undercover Architect. I don't listen to all the interviews, but often you pop in and there's ones that are quite useful, and you can have a acumen there that you can send to clients if you need to. Definitely Designful from Tassie, from that podcast, as great examples of smaller housing and enoughness. I could go on. Lighthouse, obviously my former employer, but now Jenny, the director from there, has started the Fix It Chicks, and they are one to follow if you're wanting to learn more about retrofit. They're moving heavily into the retrofit space on energy efficiency. Powerhouse Engineering, they're sort of ER consultants and have a great new tool, and they also promote a lot of push a lot of great, easy to digest information. Sustainable Builders Alliance, nearly forgot to say them, led by Jeremy Spencer from Positive Footprints, who is just very much in the same sort of approach and standpoint as my own work. And they just have so many great resources. The one I usually point to is they have the Sustainable Builders Alliance Toolkit, and it has this little 2-page document that lists all the stuff that you want a builder to be able to achieve on site to achieve a high quality home that you're not necessarily putting in the spec. So we tend to focus on, it's R5 insulation here and these type of windows here, but it is a list of all the little things on site, like frame your corners like this so that the insulation can go in there. And that's also a great one to upskill if you're a graduate or student wanting to understand sort of the actual building detail of how you make good quality, efficient homes perform as intended.
One of very mixed media, and I'm sure you're loving the lot of podcasts and good groups to go check out there. I think we'll just slide in one question, just so we don't miss it out too much. Coming from Tom saying, when you're in the early stages of the design process, how do you present sustainable project information to a client without overloading them with specific data?
I think you do have to bring clients on a bit of a journey, as we say. It does help that clients have usually been following us through social media or newsletters for a while. They've already sort of upskilled a fair bit before they even come to us. When clients sign on with us, and then we have a 6 to 9 month wait period at the moment. So we have a nice little folder of resources that we recommend. There's sort of 15 great articles or videos or podcasts in there. So the really keen clients will sort of devour that while they're waiting. Some of them never look at it either, and that's fine. And then it's really about communicating the value of what we're doing. And I was lucky enough at Lighthouse, Jenny the scientist was actually a trained science communicator. A lot of people don't realise, and I benefited hugely from that, learning about not only science communication but design communication. And the several tools. I would say the Powerhouse app has been a game changer for me because it loads in the energy rating, but then layers in other things like draft proofing, efficiency of heating appliances, solar PV generation. And you can, I just run it with the client. They're not really involved. They just set it up and I can toggle all these things. I get the builder involved as well. We show the graphs jumping and plummeting as we do different things. And it has just wiped out really painful conversations I used to have in the past about, oh, but we want this type of heating instead of this type of heating. They can just see it instantly. Those communication tools are really valuable to tap into.
Fantastic. And thanks so much, Sarah, for your presentation, your time and your insights. I think they'll be very useful for everyone listening today and later on YouTube, whether doing residential or in any other work, I think has been very handy. So please, follow Sarah. She posts quite regularly and it's always quite insightful when she does, to keep up to date. So that wraps up
Thanks,
our
everyone.
sustainability snack for March. Please keep the 9th of April free for our next speaker who'll be announced in the coming week. And make sure you read your Institute newsletters and follow your local and national Imagine and Sona accounts on Instagram to stay into the loop. And have a lovely day, everyone.